Welcome to the Embodiment Podcast. This show is for you if you see the body as more than a brain taxi. It's for people interested in coming home to the body as a holistic aspect of who we are and how we live. Episodes contain practical tips, exercises you can take away, and interviews with specialists from around the world. I'm your host for today, Mark Walsh.
So on the show today, Lauren Ohayon. So Lauren is a specialist in pelvic floor work in yoga and Pilates. She's come highly recommended to me by several people. I think this could be a fun one. So Lauren, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here. We actually talked a few years ago. I don't know if you remember this.
Where?
We spoke on the phone. You had invited me to be a part. I think this was like in an earlier iteration of yours. And we had a talk about me basically giving a talk to your trainees about building a good business. Do you remember that?
I do. That was always a completely different context, wasn't it? We did a course on working in business and the business side of yoga and maybe getting you to do that. Oh, well, it's nice to re-meet you then. Excuse me for forgetting we had that context. I know you're a speaker at the Embodiment Conference. My friend Catherine O'Mahony put us together. So shout out to Catherine. Where are you in the world today, Lauren?
Today I'm in Miami because I'm in Miami today. I don't think I'd be allowed to be anywhere else anyway, given the world situation of travel.
So are you restricted to travel at the moment?
I'm actually not, and I do have a lot of travel coming up. I'm going to New York City next weekend. I'm going to Utah right after that. I have Chicago planned, London. I'm not actually I'm trying not to cancel anything. But how about you? Are you going right back?
I'm flying today, so a little nervous about that. And, I'm worried that I might have a temperature or something and just get stopped and be stuck in America or, being stuck next to someone spluttering all over me on the plane or who knows, right? So, there's a certain amount of anxiety, but I'm trying not to panic. It feels like there's a line between being responsible and simultaneously not operating from fear. So, that's kind of where I'm at today. And I think it's a big anxiety for a lot of teachers in our field around losing income. Just that workshops are often the bread and butter of yoga teachers, embodiment teachers generally. So I think that's a huge fear for a lot of people.
100%. I've actually been so I have a Facebook group with, many thousands of women, and people have been asking me daily, are your events still happening? Because I have a bunch scheduled upcoming. And right now I'm not canceling anything, but I also got an email from my friend who works at Columbia Hospital, New York City, Columbia University. And she said that the city is essentially shut down, New York City, that no workshops are happening. And it's not funny, but it's amusing because my workshop is still going for next weekend. But I think you're right. I think that the world economy is tanking. Yoga teachers are suffering. Everyone, airlines.
I think particularly people who are, self-employed and don't have sick pay, that encourages people to kind of go to work. And then, where's that point where it becomes irresponsible, and without being paranoid. So it's kind of like,
totally.
We haven't got anything major coming up. We do in May. So it'll be interesting to see, and then it's like, okay, do we then put people to say, right, well, so we've taken your money, we'll give you a slot on our course next year, or do we give everyone a full refund? Or, or what if someone cancels and they're scared, but we're going to go ahead anyway? Does that mean we keep their deposit? It's kind of an unusual situation we're all in.
Yeah, we had a big team meeting this morning with our whole team to figure out that too, because like you, in May, I'm teaching a teacher training in London. I have a full sold out event. Women from all over the world are coming. So I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm not in a position where I think as events that we could be giving refunds. Since you didn't ask, I'll tell you what I think.
Yeah, go on.
But I think that saying I'm postponing, I've got the same event in 6 months, and you hope that the same people come. I get worst case, you give a refund, but at the end of the day, a lot of places are not giving us those refunds. I know for my events, my places are not refunding me. They're telling me you can postpone it. Yeah.
Interesting.
Tricky,
okay, so I think we've dived into the sort of topic of the day here. But let's backtrack a little bit, Lauren. So how did you get interested in the body and yoga and Pilates? How did your journey start?
So I was living in New York City and I was at New York University and I just, I started doing yoga. I loved it. I did a yoga teacher training. I was actually a journalist back then and studying to be a journalist. And after university, I took a year to travel and I somehow landed in Israel and I couldn't do journalism there because I didn't speak Hebrew. So I just started teaching yoga here and there and I absolutely loved it. And then a few years into that, I herniated multiple discs in my lower back and I got really interested in injury and rehab. And then I had 3 children back to back, one after the next within 3 years. And I got really interested in pelvic floor and core dysfunction. And I was teaching a lot of workshops around New York City on this topic. And my best friend, who's actually a mindset coach, was like, you've just got to bring your work online. So I started bringing my work online. And at that time, there were not a lot of people teaching core and pelvic floor online. So I broke in that way. I was really lucky. It was the right time. I started a Facebook group that was super popular and I just got really lucky with it all.
Okay, let's start with the basics. So if someone's never heard of the pelvic floor, where let's start right at the beginning for those of us who are completely ignorant, which I'm almost completely ignorant. So let's start with the basics.
So the basics are both men and women have one. The anatomy is actually very similar with a few, variables. And the support, like the role of the pelvic floor is to regulate urine and stool, like defecation and urine, sexual pleasure, and also to prevent, especially in women, but men can have prolapse, which is very, a lot of people don't know that. So to hold the organs in and up, and a prolapse is when the pelvic floor organs have slipped down into the vaginal canal. And in the case of a man, they just slip down a little lower than where they should be. It's 1,000 times more common in women though. So that's your pelvic floor. Your pelvic floor is what sits inside your pelvis and literally holds your shit in. And helps, like when a lot of women, for example, will jump on a trampoline or take a jog and leak pee, whether they've had children or not.
Yeah.
And the pelvic, it's very common, but it's not normal. And it doesn't mean you're not normal. It just means that's not a normal occurrence. Ideally, the pelvic floor is designed to prevent you from leaking urine or anything, stool, when you're not consciously trying to go to the bathroom.
Okay, so this is an area that I think the first thing to acknowledge maybe is this could be an uncomfortable topic. I'm relatively at ease talking about these kind of things, but I noticed that we're talking about like pee and poo, and we're talking about organs going through vaginas. We're talking about incontinence. This is a potentially a very embarrassing area for a lot of people.
Very. And people are not also given great information at their doctor's appointments. They're often told, oh, that's normal. You've had a baby. That's normal. And again, a lot of people who haven't had a baby have these issues. It's very common with menopausal women to end up with a prolapse. There's a lot of ambiguity around it. And then there's a lot of taboo.
So I guess for us guys out there, like I've old enough that I've got enough female friends that have had babies to have heard some stories. And frankly, some of them were kind of like horror stories at first. I was like, the first time I started hearing about this, maybe 10 years ago when I was 30, and, friends of a similar age started having babies. I was like, excuse me, what? And this just wasn't on my radar as a young man as something that could happen. And then I started to hear that it was relatively common amongst women that had babies to have all kinds of issues after that.
It is extraordinarily common. I mean, there are some statistics that show 1/3 of all women will end up with a pelvic floor dysfunction. It is extremely common. I will say, anecdotally, a lot of my friends, and kind of this is anecdotal and evidence-based based on my clinical practice, is that a lot of my clients and friends who are yoga teachers have a pelvic floor dysfunction. And that can show up also. And sometimes people get shocked when I say this, but I have a lot of yoga teacher friends who say they, for example, pushed for 8 hours and didn't dilate. yoga teachers that I know struggle to have their cervix. It's another part of the female anatomy. Dilate. Your cervix needs to dilate when you go into childbirth in order for the baby to come out, and they end up with an emergency C-section. So I have a ton of yoga friends who've had C-sections. And what's interesting about that is that in yoga, we're taught, I don't know if you've heard the word Kagel, do your Kegels, just pelvic floor contractions. And you've heard of it, mula bandha. I mean, I'm sure yoga teachers love to throw that word around like it's salt and pepper.
Okay, so Kegels is an American term, so many of the Europeans may not.
It is not American.
It's
Dr.
American
Kagel, I bet he was not American.
He may not have been, but just so you know, this is a term which is more commonly used in the US than the UK, for sure.
Wow.
Absolutely, for sure. Well, I didn't hear it till I went to the US. But so are you saying a Kegel is the equivalent to the mula bandha in yoga?
I'm saying that's so subjective because every teacher teaches mula bandha differently. But yes, I am ultimately saying that what is your understanding? Have you ever said to somebody to do a mula bandha? Is that a term you've used?
I'm aware of it as a yoga terminology, but it's not something I work with personally.
And what was your understanding of what you should be doing when you hear that term?
I've heard it taught in various ways. Some teachers saying it's a sort of more of a subtle feeling of lifting up that naturally happens when you're doing certain poses. Others say actually actively contract the muscles you would use if you were stopping yourself having a pee.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So that's the. And are you saying
pelvic floor contraction could be another way of talking about it.
And are you saying that yoga teachers? It's more common that yoga teachers have some of these pelvic floor issues, or that just happens to be who you're around?
I'm saying neither. I mean, I'm saying that what I've found to be true is that many yoga teachers do have, there seems to be a high rate of Cesarian births amongst yoga teachers. And when I ask them what happened in the childbirth experience, they didn't dilate is often what I hear. That baby had a hard time coming down and through the pelvic floor. The pelvic floor needs to yield to allow a baby out. And that's another function of the pelvic floor, is to yield to allow a baby to come out.
And there's just a slightly weird thing in some schools of yoga, particularly Ashtanga, some vinyasa schools, that one should have one's pelvic floor contracted the entire time. And this always struck me as slightly strange. I
mean, would you walk around with your bicep contracted the whole time?
Of course not. It's bizarre,
exactly. Right? It's totally bizarre. It's totally fucked up. I'm like, where? Like, clearly some man decided that was a good idea. And, I don't know where it comes from, to be honest. I don't know the history of that cue, but it is probably one of the worst cues I've ever heard. And I think if anything, it can potentially cause more damage than anything.
And for me, it also leads sort of somatically leads to a certain uptightness.
Mm-hmm.
If I meet someone that's got that feel to them, like that's all held. I mean, it could be for a good reason, like that person's a trauma survivor or something like that. But I certainly wouldn't want to be encouraging that as a way of being, as well as just some of the muscular issues that it sounds like you're way more informed than me about.
Totally. Yeah, I agree with you. And one of the things that kind of I teach in my workshops and teaching and all of that is to recognize the amount of tightness and tension you hold in your core. And so I work with the core and pelvic floor. And the same thing happens with the core. There's a condition that...
Sorry, so I'm going to jump in on what's the core? I often hear Pilates people talk about this, and it seems to be very ill-defined. So what do you mean by the core?
I would define the core as the part of your body that is the conduit that leads to the conduit between your axial and between your two axial bodies, or your two articular bodies, excuse me. So you have your arms hanging off your core, and you have your legs coming off the bottom of your core. And I see the core as the conduit for those. And so I don't see the core as one muscle or even one group of muscles. It is more of a geographical location in your body that serves as a conduit.
Okay, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to make that clear because it seems people use the term in sort of quite radically different ways. Hello?
Yeah. Sorry. Were you asking a question or?
No. I was apologizing for interrupting you. You were in mid-flow before I asked that question.
No. You're good. We're all good. I'm happy to describe what the core is or...
So you were saying you help people become aware of some of the tensions?
Yeah. So a lot of people that I work with have a core disruption as well, which is known as a diastasis recti. And that's where, again, it's often thought of as solely belonging to people who've had babies, but actually I work with many, many men and also children. So, and that's when the abdominal wall, there's a separation in the abdominal wall from the midline. So the abdominal wall wraps around and connects to the midline, and that midline linea alba tension line can thin out, can stretch, thin out, so to speak. Especially like if you get pregnant and so your abdominal wall is stretched when you're no longer pregnant, ideally your abdominal wall comes back to integrity. And if it doesn't, you have a gap there, and that's called the Diastasis Recti. And one of the contributing factors can be too much abdominal tension. And primarily women, especially, are constantly told to suck their bellies in. And that's another yoga and Pilates cue. Hold your bellies in tight. Hold your bellies in tight. I always feel like you have a pair of jeans on. You want to zip up your jeans. It's not actually, like you were saying before, it seems so kind of ridiculous as a cue. It is, in fact, to hold tension in your body anywhere. And it can lead to these lack of integrity, lack of function, and then these injuries.
So, I mean, I'm hearing you say quite a lot of traditional yoga cues may be very bad for your pelvic floor.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, there are many traditional yoga cues. I'm talking about two of them, but yeah, I could go on and on about certain yoga cues. I think that there's a lot about the body, like how the body should look on the outside is not necessarily how the body really functions. So suck your stomach in might give you a look, but does it actually give you the desired outcome? Or pull your shoulders down your back is another cue that I don't love. Like it gives you a look when you do it, or straighten your knee and lock your knee and lift your kneecaps. Okay, well now we've got straight lines. I think a lot of yoga is really kind of designed upon like how something really looks, that it should look really a specific way. And that doesn't often take into account though, how the body really functions under load and tension.
Right. There's a reality of physics and anatomy that maybe wasn't so obvious to the people who were, drawing straight lines on pictures, and this kind of imposition of platonic shapes on the organic functionality of the body maybe isn't so smart. So I think the yoga world is getting this. It does seem like these things are common, like in guys as well. Like this is quite common, for example, in British toilets in train stations to see like advertisements for kind of like sanitary pads, but to stop urine. It's clearly something that happens to people. And I've definitely had that as a guy, like the embarrassment of going to the toilet, thinking I was done, and then a minute or two later seeing there's a little wet patch on my trousers. And a certain shame around that, like, oh God, and I'm not old, I thought incontinence was for 60-year-old men. Here I am at 40, with this a little bit of this happening. So I can definitely see it's an awkward thing for people to talk about sometimes.
It is awkward. I try to demystify it. I mean, I try to very much make it not an awkward, not a shame. I think it's also shaming. I mean, a lot of the people that I work with feel so shamed. And I work with a lot of athletes and yoga teachers and Pilates teachers who feel so let down by their body, like so let down by their body as a result of these injuries. And I guess,
and particularly if people are body people, they're kind of, hey, I've done all this yoga, I've done all this Pilates, whatever. Like, this shouldn't be letting me down. This can become the feeling sometimes, right?
Totally. I think, absolutely. Like I've ticked off all the boxes, I meet the requirements. I'm healthy. I'm fit. Why is my cervix on the outside of my body? It doesn't belong there.
So let's be a bit graphic here then. So a cervix, so that's the kind of entrance to the womb at the top of the vagina, that can actually be on the outside.
Yeah, prolapse comes in stages. So you can, and again, there's so much gray. These stages, are we getting out a measuring tape? But still there are stages, and the cervix can just be lower than average, than normal, right? So you can stick your finger inside your vagina and feel your cervix there. Or it can be where you open your legs and you literally can see your cervix. It's not like it's hanging between your legs, but it can definitely be bulging. And that's when you're at the end, like that's called a stage 4, when it's really out of your body. But it doesn't have to be out of your body to cause a lot of shame and embarrassment and discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
And often, again, a lot of my clients have been very written off by their practitioners. Oh, it's normal. You've had a baby. There's nothing to do. You get to live with this for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've had female friends who've had, for example, tearing between the vagina and the anus, and there'd be feces in their vagina, and their doctor's saying, oh, this is just something to live with, no big deal. And they're going, what the hell? It's the end of my sex life. Come on, what the hell? Surely this feels bad. This doesn't look great. Surely there's something to be done here.
Totally. And one of my clients reported to me that she and her husband were having sex, and he was like, you smell like shit. First of all, like, what a fucking asshole, right? But unfortunately, and for a few cases, that can be the case. And it's so awful. I mean, it's awful.
Quick break in the podcast to ask you to look at techcrowdfund.org. That's TEC for Charlie, crowdfund.org. On here you can see some ridiculously good deals about embodiment. I mean, most of my books and courses, they're things I'm giving away. This is all related to the Embodiment Conference. You can get a sneak peek at what some of the technology for the conference is going to look like. You can decide if you want to be a Zoom food grandmaster, a ninja professional, a unicorn rider, a dolphin sensei. All this will make complete sense on the website. Take a look. The offers really are very, very good. We're basically raising money ahead for the conference, so there's some offers there that you just won't get again. If you're interested in embodiment, then do check that out. It's TEC for Charlie, crowdfund.org, techcrowdfund.org. And back to the show.
I thought we're doing a public service, putting this out there. I'm kind of imagining, some people kind of cringing when they hear this, and some people nodding like, come on, fucking hell, Mark, obviously, how come you don't know this already, So I think it's good that we're putting it out there. And what is your advice, or how do you help with people with this?
So the core is a pressure system. So I talk about it more like the core, because the pelvic floor is the bottom of the core system, right? Because we were talking about like, what is the core? The core is that conduit. So the pelvic floor is the bottom of it, and the diaphragm would almost be the top of it, right? So the diaphragm is right underneath I know, but maybe for listeners, the diaphragm is inside your rib cage. So really at the top of your abdomen, so to speak, and then your pelvic floor is at the bottom. So the roof and the floor. And there's usually a lot of compensation patterns happening that are creating extra pressure. So if you can imagine like a water balloon that was shaped like an egg, and now I take the water balloon and I squeeze the top of it, you can see what would happen is it would bulge at the bottom or bulge at the right, it would bulge somewhere. That bulging is core and pelvic floor dysfunction. And so we're looking to now reduce the bulge. And so some of the things that we look at so that would be called intra-abdominal pressure. Like that pressure in the core and pelvic floor system is a big contributing factor. So we can't really start to resolve the issue until we figure out like what are some of the things that are causing it.
Got it. So it could be someone's tight, holding those muscles into the stomach.
That's right.
Lower down. I mean, what other things cause kind of imbalances there?
So like a lot of people have been told that belly breathing is an ideal way to breathe. Mm-hmm. Belly breathing has been also very much confused with the word diaphragmatic breathing. So unless you're on a ventilator, you are breathing diaphragmatically no matter what.
Okay.
And breathing into your belly is just one way of changing shape. So you can breathe into your belly, or you can breathe into your ribs, or you can do a combination of both. You can breathe into your chest. You can breathe into a variety of parts of air goes into one place, breath is the movement. So air is coming into your lungs, period, no matter what. But then the movement that happens as a result is breathing. So when your body accommodates the pressure differential, which is the active breathing, you increase volume somewhere. So belly breathing is a way of increasing volume. You do it in your belly. That's not the most ideal way to breathe for moving around your life. And I know that's a hard pill to swallow, especially if you're a diehard yoga person. But belly breathing is not the most effective way to utilize your body to support load and tension.
It's interesting we have these terms like chest breathing or belly breathing, as you say. It's always the diaphragm at work. And or even you hear like breathe into your toes or things like that. And,
well, you can't, right? Yeah. But you can, that's right. But you can breathe in a way where your belly protrudes and your ribs do nothing.
Yeah.
And that's a majority of my clients are doing that.
Because they've learned that this is more yogic or something like this.
Or their ribs are super tight. You know how easy it is to never have to move your rib cage? You can move your neck instead. For everything someone calls your name, you spin your neck around. You never really have to mobilize your ribs. They never have to do much movement. We don't move them in 3 dimensions. Right.
Unless you've seen the, some of the sort of Balinese or Indian dancing forms with it. And then you go, wow, ribs can really move a whole lot more than I thought was possible. I thought that was just a big cage, but it's actually got all these wonderful articulations possible.
Yeah. So if the top of your core system is tight and rigid, can you imagine that somewhere has to move? So you're going to be doing all this extra movement. You're going to be adding all this extra pressure down below and forward into the core.
My experience as well, I spent a lot of time belly breathing through martial arts, aikido, all about the center, until it became a habit. Even girlfriends used to say, even at night, I belly breathed, And then also culturally, sort of the British tend to be quite closed down emotionally, which I think is a sort of somatic influence. And I remember when I first learned to sort of breathe more in my chest for some Feldenkrais lessons and somatic bodywork in America, and like a whole nother emotional sense opened up as well. It was like, I think for some people, it's a way of closing down by not, emotionally by not moving the chest.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with you. And I think that also I'm working with a lot of women, and we're taught to hide our breasts and hide our chest and don't be too sexy and don't be provocative. And so we can start slouching and hunching, which would lock down the ribs as well.
I noticed when there's the emotional pieces in there about women hiding themselves and putting, I just used to this with teenage girls. They start growing breasts and then the whole chest area collapses in almost to hide them. And the other one, I've worn a bra a few times, and I found that incredibly restrictive on the chest.
Extremely.
Was that just my experience, or was that?
No, and I don't even wear bras. And when I do, I wear it's called a bralette. There's no wire. It's super flexible, and bras are 100%, in my opinion, not very healthy for, and again, this whole idea of an underwire is usually who's that serving?
So I know what that is, but most guys won't. So do you want to say what an underwire is?
Yeah. So built into many bras are just a wire that rests beneath the breast. And it helps I guess it can help to push the breasts up. I mean, one of my children has very large breasts, and she, I think, feels more comfortable with a wire supporting her at times because, again, this idea of hide your boobs is so rampant. But yeah, the wire goes underneath your breasts and kind of holds them in tighter, and I think can pull them up and give them more definition and shape.
So I just have a little challenge for the male embodiment teachers listening to this. It's about 30 or 40% of our audience, which is to try a bra on for a day. Just wear it under your clothes for a day. Find one that's about the same size as you. And you can do that in a secondhand shop, or find a friend who's willing to lend you one. And if not, even a belt will probably do it. And just see how that is for a day. And I just want to put that challenge out there to some of the men listening who may not have experienced that.
Yeah, or wear thong underwear.
also a challenge. I mean, there's some different anatomy there, but it's yeah.
Totally. But I do have a lot of men with core and pelvic floor dysfunction. And when they start to do the work with me, they're like, ooh, yeah. Because I talk about it as we have a lot of blind spots and compensations. And a lot of my male clients were like, I had no idea that I was constantly gripping my belly, or I had no idea that I was constantly locking down my shoulders and locking them into my chest. And, a lot of men can have these issues, but like you said, I think men are the least, they really don't want to discuss it.
It's taken me a while to get there. And I've come from a family of women that are quite open about these things. But I think not everyone's had the benefit of sort of feisty Irish women growing up with. But okay, so what are some of the other things that you help people with then? So you help them become aware of some of these tension patterns. Give me a bit more of a sense of what someone might do in a workshop with you.
So one of the other things that so a lot of the people who come to me who are injured feel like shit about themselves. So one of the things that I talk about a lot in my workshops is I talk a lot about pain. I talk a lot about the correlation between pain and injury. I talk a lot about how your body can't be broken, how you're not a twig. So we're moving a little bit away from like the anatomy of the core and pelvic floor. But I think it's really important that when we are in a field of helping people recover, that we are careful as practitioners not to label people ourselves as, you won't get better unless you fix this alignment issue. You won't get better unless you stop belly breathing. You won't get better. And I think that I can be guilty of giving off that message because in my work, I'm really well known for my online program. And in my online program, I go through a bunch of like alignment breathing spinal patterns that could be more harmful rather than helpful. Harmful is a really bad word, that are just not beneficial. And I have people kind of assess some of their movement and see where they might have a blind spot, what part of their body is not working as optimally as it could. And this is amazingly empowering, but also can be extraordinarily debilitating because it just confirms you. It can confirm to you, like, I really am broken. It gives you more and more evidence of how fucked up you are. So one of the things I try to do in my workshops a lot is help people understand that, like, you can heal, like healing happens on a spectrum. And we're all still healing. And just because you've got a functional body doesn't mean that you won't wake up in pain one day. And that pain is often not correlated with like a pathology. You can, so I just try to help people also be really real about this journey because people want answers and they want quick fixes. And sometimes that seeking of all of that can be more detrimental. Sometimes I tell people, if you read a book that told you that your pain would go, like, the Healing Back Pain book by John Sarno. I don't know if you've heard of that, but how many people have read that book and by chapter 1, their back pain is gone? That was my experience. And I recommend it to a lot of my clients. And why is that? And that's the placebo effect. There's just so much more happening in the brain than, like, you can't fix everything with a chaturanga. You can't fix everything with a downward facing dog. And not only that, like, we don't need to fix things. We just need to be more at peace with things and just be on a committed journey to be on this journey, as opposed to like, there's an end point and there's a finish line and I need to get to the finish line. And people don't optimize where they're at now. They optimize for the finish line. Yeah. And I think that's a problem.
Okay. So moving from a perspective of I'm broken and I need to be fixed to what? What's the alternative to that? Let's just spell it out.
I'm normal. I'm human. I've got an injury, period. Here are the things I can do to try to help myself, period. I think what we often do is write the story. I woke up, I'm in pain. What did I do? Fuck, I did that run. I shouldn't have done the run. I knew it was bad for me. We write a story. Like, we create these narratives that further reinforce how we make bad decisions for ourselves, how we're not capable of caring for ourselves, whatever our narrative is. We look for ways to kind of embody that more.
And I guess it's very natural that if someone's, for example, they're 30, they've just had a baby, all of a sudden they're wetting their pants all the time. They want to get fixed, right? Like, that's
100%.
Yeah. So again, like, what would you say to someone that's in that situation? I know a lot of our listeners, maybe at that kind of age, they've just had a baby. They go, oh my God, no one told me about this because no one's talking about it in my culture. All of a sudden I'm wetting my knickers. Like, what would you say? What would you say there?
I've worked with thousands of women who've healed their bodies. It is completely possible. It will not happen overnight. And it will also not happen if you obsess about it. And so what we're looking to do, I'll say what we're looking to do is, so let's say there's this big snowstorm and suddenly the path that you take every day to walk from your house to the metro is closed, but you've got to get to work or you're going to get fired. It would be really beneficial for you to know 5 other ways from your house to the metro station. And what we're doing in your body is we're uncovering those 5 other pathways to get from point A to point B. And it's going to take time, and it won't, and so healing is a journey. We're going to do the work. Nothing's wrong, meaning that like the first way is not wrong. There's 5 ways to get from your house to the metro. 1 or 2 of those ways is probably a little bit more optimal than the other ways. We're going to uncover all 5 ways so that your body can figure out like what might be a better way to proceed. And so we definitely learn technique. The whole workshop is technique. We assess your core, we find the blind spots, and then we do the quote unquote fix for that blind spot. There is like a way that we figure out each blind spot, and then what do you do about the blind spot? But there's also a way that you can buy into this idea of like, well, there we go, I'm so fucking broken and I need to do this, that, and the other, as opposed to just like, why can't we? Yeah. And you're right, Mark, that like when people are wetting their pants every day, they want it gone tomorrow. But you can't have it gone tomorrow. I mean, you can have surgery, but there's a huge fail rate for that too. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you can either wake up and whinge every day and complain and bitch and moan, or you can just do the work and watch how your body listens to you, because it will. I see that the women who find the most healing through my programs are also the one who are just doing the work and believing that it's working.
And just so listeners know, is the program only for women, just in terms of that?
No, it's for everybody, but I do have a Facebook group with 20,000 women in it, and that's only for women.
How is that running? Just like side note, like
insane.
I'm in charge of,
and amazing.
I run one for the Embodiment Conference, which I think 16 or 17,000. It will probably be 50,000 by the time the conference happens. So, I mean, how is it running a Facebook group for that many people? Just that many people, let alone people with maybe particular issues.
So it's not a group. It's really a community. Like the way I see it is it's a community. Yep. And I have over 100 trained Restore Your Core teachers. That's the name of my program. So I teach a teacher training called Restore Your Core. And there's over 100 of them. They answer questions. They don't have to. They're under no contract. I don't ask them for anything. They do it. They're amazing. And it's so many women have been in there from the day the group opened. I have a lot of women who started out with me who are still with me. And it feels more like one big community than anything. People are so kind and loving and nurturing. And I love it. I love the Facebook group. I love the energy of it. It's changed my life.
You know what's interesting? What's interesting is that social media gets a lot of stick, and I think sometimes rightly so. This can be really toxic on some social media environments, but there's also really good groups that have.
Yes.
It's all about the culture, isn't it? The culture that's set in the group. I know Irene Lyons has a great one on trauma, for example. I often hear good things about, and the conference one is really positive. We just don't get a lot of trolling or spamming or unpleasantness. You can make a culture online which is supportive.
Ooh, are you there?
Yeah. Still here.
You jumped out for a second. Yeah, 100%. Oh, this group is amazing. And people tell me, I am so lucky. I get people posting in the group every day saying, you've changed my life. I came in here feeling broken, or I came in here thinking I was worthless, or I came in here, because a lot of the work we do is you are worthy. And a lot of the work I do also on social media is to also talk about like body positivity and all of that stuff, and loving yourself, and how hard it is to love yourself when you don't love the way you look, or why you don't love the way you look because like how you should look has been decided upon by all these other people. So it's a really loving, accepting. I also don't care. I don't have any issues if people are like, I'm getting my breasts enhanced. Great. Go do that. I'm having surgery for my issue. Great. Go do that. Like, I don't judge either. Like, the choices you make for your body are completely acceptable. And I think people know that. They can talk about anything in the group.
I think it's definitely this sort of body positivity, and this coming to yoga in quite a big way now. In the way it was sort of, yoga was part of the wider trend of telling men and women they had to look a certain way. And now it seems like it might be part of the solution. Like, this seems to be pretty popular in the yoga world now.
Although I think you still have like your fair share of so many of these Instagram stars who are just,
True.
Which again, let's not judge and fault that either. I mean, who are we to? Like, everyone loves to shit on everybody else's Instagram page. I try to avoid knocking all of that down.
Yeah. And just as we sort of move to a close here, like, what is some things you'd love every person out there to know about the work you do?
Ooh, that's a hard question to answer. I want people to know first, and I guess I would say that if you have an injury, no matter what injury you have, your mindset around your injury is probably the biggest predictor to how, like, healing your injury. I think it starts with mindset and belief set, and that it's always healthy I think it's a good idea to find somebody to work with who doesn't peg you as they're trying to fix you, because that implies that you're broken. And so I would say that no matter what your injury is, start with, feeling like you can overcome it, because you can. And especially core and pelvic floor, you just might have to get off the mainstream of like, do your Kagels, or just do a crunch, or do more yoga, or you just need Ashtanga yoga, or you need more mula bandhas, all of that.
Yeah.
And education is empowerment. The more you know about what you're dealing with, the better.
And before we sort of do your own stuff, is there any other resources you'd say would be useful for people out there on this topic?
Ooh, you mean like for core and pelvic floor?
Yeah. Like things we'll plug your stuff at the end as well, but are there any kind of other resources you'd recommend?
No, I mean, I'm the fucking best. No, I mean, I don't know. Oh, that's a tricky question. I wish you told me you'd ask me that. There are a lot of people doing great work in the field of like mindset or even placebo. I really love like all the work on placebo and belief system and kind of the work around that. As far as like other experts, I mean, who do core and pelvic floor stuff. Ooh, I'm like,
you don't want to go there. Okay.
I'm trying to think everyone knows the PT. There's a lot of PTs and stuff, and they're all great. There's a guy in Australia called Anthony Lowe. There's Diane Lee. There's, Wendy Powell is in England. Jenny Burrell is in England. Louisa Thomas is in England. She's amazing. Don't interview any of them. No, I'm kidding.
No worries. Okay. So in terms of your stuff, what is an online course? You do workshops? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I do workshops all over. I come to England all the time. I come to England once or twice not all the time, once or twice a year for workshops and trainings. I did online is the Restore Your Core. You can just Google Restore Your Core. That's me. You'll find me right there. I have all of Instagram, social media, restoreyourcore.com. And I do workshops for moms. I do workshops for professionals. And a lot of our Restore Your Core teachers teach professionals workshops. So if you are a yoga teacher and you're like, well, I don't want to do a whole program, we have one-day workshops that just bring your literacy from like do your Kagels to a little bit more evidence-based, science-based information.
Okay, so it's restoreyourcore.com. Okay, cool. And a closing message about the body, Lauren?
That it's ever evolving and changing, and it's responding to input, and it's just always adapting to what you do with it. So if you give it love, it'll output love back to you. Essentially,
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Some ways to get more, to give back, and to get more involved now. So the biggest request I have would be to share the podcast with your friends, people that you think would really enjoy it. Email it to them, put it on your social media, tell them about it, old school. Really appreciate that. Equally, if you want to support us financially, you can go to Patreon. That's patreon.com/Embodiment Podcast and give us $1 an episode. And I'd say they're well worth $1. So that's less than £1 if you're in UK-ish. So please go there. On the embodiedfacilitator.com website is where this is hosted. Most people I think listen to for iTunes. iTunes, we'd certainly appreciate a review. The way iTunes works means that a review means more people will find it. iTunes regards it as more important for searches. So even a couple of sentences review really does help as a little thank you to us. And if you want to go to embodiedfacilitator.com, you can see the actual, links to the sites. There's comments on there. The Facebook group tends to be where people discuss things. So if you go to put in the Embodiment Podcast into Facebook, there's a page which is relatively quiet and a group which does have some discussion on. So I will reply to things personally there. So also on embodiedfacilitator.com website, There's all sorts of freebies there. There's videos, there's free ebooks, there's ebooks you can buy. And of course, there's our newsletter list. If you want to stay in touch and learn about things like the Embodied Facilitator Course and our next Embodied Yoga Principles teacher training, then go to that website and you'll see a little pop-up and you can get the newsletter through there. Okay, so I think they're the main ones. Tell your friends, pay us some money on Patreon, give us a review on iTunes, send us your email if you want to be on the newsletter list, and get involved on the Facebook. There, bit long. Pick whatever you like that works for you.